Where? And the first thing. Yeah. Yay, party! Alright, hey everyone. Um, as you see, I'm new here. I mean, I don't know how is this working. I'm not quite sure why I'm using it. Oh yes, my Linux didn't work here. You know, it's Linux, you never know with Linux. But either way, I'd like to talk to you about some WordPress setup for wider projects. And a couple of words about me. I'm a WordPress ambassador at SiteGround. You already heard a couple of words from Danny about SiteGround, about the hosting service over there. You can find me on Twitter by NoFearing. That's my Twitter handle. I'm a WordPress consultant for various projects where we do WordPress work. And I'm also an open source addict. And as you can see, I feel really inconvenient using this thing with the button apple. Not quite sure how exactly does it work, but you know, at least it's based on some sort of Linux. I mean, BSD, so Unix, so it feels at least a bit better. Either way, I'm an open source addict, and that's one of the reasons I'm using WordPress in the first place, and not using, say, .NET or some other creepy abbreviature. And I'm also a coffee server. Most of the time I'm working from some coffee places, just sitting in a comfortable sofa and coding some WordPress stuff. Now, the topic that I want to present to you is for large WordPress projects, and there's one guy called Mark Jaquith, who is also known as the Don Draper of WordPress, and he's usually the person who is doing this all wide setup talk, because most of the time he's just saying, okay, I mean, we have some automated structure, we have something set up for all the project, but we need to make it even more automated, even easier, even more streamlined, so that it's actually even easier for people to do WordPress work and actually work on WordPress projects in the first place. So I'd like to present my own opinion on the WordPress architecture part and on the large setup configurations, how to pick the proper WordPress platform. But if you want to get even more comprehensive insight, so to speak, you can always check his videos. He's called Mark Jaquith. He's quite popular. He's one of the lead WordPress contributors. How many of you have heard of Mark Jaquith before? Ooh, you can check his videos. He's really awesome presenter, and as you already saw, he's the Don Draper of WordPress. Either way, now, the first thing we need to know, generally the talk is going to outline several different ways to configure a WordPress environment, or more of how to set up it in a different way, like starting from the servers and then moving to some different ways to actually create your project more automated and working in a pretty much better way. So the most popular architecture, or the most popular setup for WordPress projects, is the WAMP structure, which is the Linux, some Apache, which is the most popular server for most shared hosting vendors, and not only, like most people tend to use Apache. PHP and MySQL are the standard addition to this stack. And well, you know, Apache is quite easy to configure at some point of degree. Most applications such as WordPress do provide some htaccess rules that you can find either for a single site or multi-site. If you use some caching plugins such as WP AutoCache or WP SuperCache, it's also going to add some rewrite rules to your htaccess file. And generally, all the plugins are pretty much ready and set up to work with Apache one way or the other. However, the other popular solution is substituting Apache with Nginx and PHP with PHP FPM. Why is that? Because Nginx is the new age web server. It's quite faster, it's lighter. It's also a reverse proxy structure, which makes it even better to just forward traffic one way or the other. It's it's a bit hard to configure at some point of degree, even though you can set it up in 20 minutes, but some people do prefer it. Nginx and PHP FPM are the continuation of building websites for larger and scalable projects. WordPress.com is running on Nginx and PHP FPM, which is important for you to know, because WordPress.com is pretty much the largest WordPress project out there, unless someone is ready to say some other project. Is there any multi-site with like more than 100 million websites? Multi-site? Anyone? I thought that the Portugal community probably has some multi-site with 100 million websites. So you can probably start working on this and do a Guinness record for largest multi-site out there. I'll be ready to come here in 2 years and just hear about your new project. So I'll take the credit then. Either way, when you pick the environment, whether it's Apache and PHP on the top of some Linux, or Nginx and PHP FPM, you already have some server setup that you need to continue working on, and working on pretty much in your WordPress product. The other thing that you, of course, need to know is the version control. And what we normally need to do is to version control all the things. Version control is the thing that you need to do for every single project of yours, no matter if it's even the code or your homework for the university or anything like this. I want to ask, how many of you don't use version control for every single project? Don't be shy. Okay, well, you really need to set a version control. And if you have that case, your notebook is down or your hard drive is broken or something, you say, hey, I really needed this and I forgot to back it up, or I need to find one of those 20,000 zip files like my first version.zip and my first version.zip, or my update of the first version.zip. Well, then you're doing it wrong. And you really need to do version control. My first version control experience was in 2005 or 2006, not quite sure, and it was actually for slides, for presentations. We were doing courses and we were actually updating the slides, and we were updating them in SVN, because Git is what the cool kids do now, but we didn't have Git back then. And SVN was pretty helpful even then, because when we did some updates, changing slides, removing screenshots and whatsoever, we really had to do like, oh wait, this slide disappeared. I needed that code snippet. So it was easier to basically get back there and get what we needed from this presentation. So the most popular thing in the version control system, at least in the WordPress ecosystem, is Subversion, as you probably know. Subversion is the system that's used on WordPress.org. It's used for maintaining the WordPress core. It's used for plugins and for themes. All the new versions are pretty much synchronized with Subversion. So it's the natural way for most developers to actually learn and use in the process of the regular WordPress development. However, Subversion has various cons, and some people, when they spend more time doing some development, whether it's WordPress or some other open source software or even some proprietary software, they try to use something that's a bit more optimal, that allows some local setup or so forth. And one of the best solutions, in addition to Mercurial, is Git. How many of you do use Git? Alright, so we are well acquainted with Git, which is the best news here. But as a just short story, Git is quite popular and quite helpful due to the fact that you can basically push from one client to the other and do quite a lot of graphs, and even some graph networks that you can push one server to the other and exchange details, exchange data, push and pull data in both directions. And it also allows for you to create a local repository. So if for now you've been saying, like, I have this local project, but it isn't posted anywhere, and I really need to set it under version control, and I'm not always available online, you can set Git locally. You can just go to your project, set Git init, hit enter, and you have your Git repository. Then you can do git add, you can add all your files, do git commit, -m, some message, and then you're all set. You have your first version of the repository. It's really that simple. In addition to that, Git has other cool features. One of them is called submodules. And submodules is a way to actually use Git repositories connected and actually synchronized with other Git repositories. For instance, say you use Bootstrap, or you use some other fancy library, or even jQuery with all of its UI components and libraries and stuff. And you also want to be on the latest version as much as possible, or just set to a specific version of, say, Backbone or jQuery. What you can do is just set your project, host it on Git, like do some development there, and add a submodule of your specific library or project, or even plugin, you name it, add a specific version of it that's a submodule of your own project. Then you can develop both of them separately. You can always say git submodule update, and it's going to update the submodule. You can work independently on your project without interfering with the submodule. It's quite helpful. One of the most popular like applications for submodules are when you do team development and you have a framework. Because you can do the following: you have 30 teams, each one of them is in its own repository, and you have a framework which is in a separate repository. So you don't keep the framework in each team folder, but you keep it in a separate folder. And whenever you update the framework, you can just get some module update everywhere, and it's going to populate the updates there. It's quite handy. GitHub is the natural process of bringing the version control to a social network. It's pretty much one of the social networks where I'm personally mostly active at. It's pretty much Twitter and GitHub. Because it's really helpful to get most of the projects there. You can contribute there by issuing pull updates. How many of you have issued pull updates to some projects on GitHub? Not too many? Well, see, you're following into this scenario. You need a plugin for a project. You need whatever, some framework or some even underscore S or something like that. So you need some project and you need to work on it, and it's there on GitHub. And you say, I'm going to need this project and I'm really going to use it. And you say, I already have a repository, it's on GitHub. I like this project, it's also on GitHub. And I need to do some changes. Then you can do two things. First, you can fork this repository and create your own cloned version, because it's open source, and you're allowed to have your own version over there. You work on this version and add it to your project, and you say, this modified version, I can add a new feature, I can update the styles, I can update something else from the look and feel, from the functionality, from the features. And if this feature would be used, say it's a bug fix or something like that, you can also issue a pull request to the original repository and say, hey guys, I use your plugin or theme and I found a bug, or I thought that this fix might be helpful. So this is my patch here. I'm using it already in my version of the repository. So feel free to just merge it into your code. And if the plugin or theme author is an active contributor, he can just test and say, oh wait, that's awesome. I have the code ready. I just really need to do merge, and it's pretty much getting into the original code base. So you help your own project, and you help the original project too. By also, if the author is not ready to merge it, you have your own version there, and other people can use your version too, which is quite awesome. The next thing you need to know is testing, because I heard several questions a bit earlier upon the, I think, Andreas talk, probably, that is related to testing and different ways of testing. And the worst way to test is actually, it's really not seen here, but the guy says, when I do testing in production. So pretty much that's what's happening with most of the people. They say, okay, I have the live site, or I get a new project, which I'm doing freelance for whatsoever, and I need to do just some small tiny details. And, well, I'm just going to move this file here and just going to do the test. It's not the right way to do, and especially speaking of large projects, which is, they take more time, they might take years to develop. WordPress is no longer a blogging system, so you might want to really work on some software as a service or platform as a service and support it the right way. So there are different approaches that you might take yourself. The first one is PHP Unit. PHP Unit is pretty much the most popular framework for creating unit tests for PHP. Unit tests is testing separate small features for a given class or from a given library. By say each class has methods, they all rely on input-output. So you know for each method that whenever you pass this input, you're supposed to get this output. That's how normally the programming abstraction works. That's one of the principles of the object-oriented programming called tight cohesion and loose coupling. Everything is separated and each method does one specific singular thing. So PHP Unit is ready to help you with this. Some people do use PHP Unit after the project has started. Other people do test-driven development, and they generally first create the tests, and then for each test, they design the code. They create the test. I expect that I'm going to have a product, and when I create a new product, I'm going to create it with a price. When I do price increase by 20, it's going to have this price increase by 20. So what we can do is design the product by this test, design the increase method or increment or whatever, and make sure that whatever the input is, when we do increase by 20, it's going to increase by 20. Of course, we don't have to hard code 20, because it's not a good thing, but we're going to use regular variables so that we can increase by everything. Either way, QUnit is the JavaScript way to do unit testing, because JavaScript is now a quite important part of the WordPress project. We have a lot of JavaScript code. We have libraries such as _s with Backbone. We have different sorts of jQuery and prototyping, and a lot of fancy things. We have the new gallery feature, from 3.6, and part of it from 3.5, which is based on Backbone. So we have a lot of JavaScript. So our JavaScript has to be well maintained, and we also need to test it. So QUnit is one of the logical projects to use for testing your JavaScript framework. You can easily embed it into your project and run some UI-driven tests. You can also use just console operations with something like Node.js to run your JavaScript test for the project. The WordPress core itself is using some of these frameworks to run their own tests, and you can find them in the development release on develop.svn WordPress.org and see how exactly is it planned and how is it going, and in the development process of the WordPress core. So I'd really like to have this here. So we have progress with the Mac. It's running slowly, but yay! That's fine, thank you. So we have this another tool, another framework, which is for testing. They call it business expectations. I'll just call it behavioral-driven development, because most of the time, even if you do the proper way of the object-oriented programming and overall business programming, you come to some cases where you just need to do some testing, like I need to click here, or I need to create this. This is going to create this. Then I'm going to test it against this. I'm going to add it to an array, and this is what I'm going to do. And this is the technical part. But in fact, you really want to do, I want to get these several products and place them to the cart. And when they're in the cart, I'm going to create a new session or add a new user, and it's going to use like this and this and this. Each of these operations corresponds to some code, but it's not as well decoupled as you might want it to be. So behavioral-driven development is the way for you to test this sort of operation. We have this one of the most popular frameworks here. You can see tests for this in plugins such as DAO-PCLI that I'm going to cover a bit later. And you can cover your business expectations by writing behalf tests. What you do normally is you create some features and then you create some scenarios. So the features is something that you pretty much set up, and then you have the scenarios, what happens after calling some operations. Another thing, in addition to the behavioral-driven development, in the, say, shell console environment, is also Ming, which is the web acceptance testing. Why would you need this? In fact, well, because normally you have user interface applications. As we already said, you have lots of Ajax, you have, say, real estate websites, you have search filters or ratings or anything like this. And you need to get that covered too. So, with Ming, you can do the following. I want to open this page, I want to do this search, like I'm going to get this drop down. For instance, I'm opening a real estate web page, and I have filters. I'm going to get to the bed filter. I only need to see all houses with 3 beds, and I'm also going to go to the price filter, and I only want to see all houses that are less than 500,000. And then I'm going to hit the search, and I'm going to expect some output. So you also can automate front-end operations, so to speak, to test against your data. If it's too heavy for you, Ming supports WebKit, which is you can run Chrome or what is this browser here? Oh, Safari. So you can do one of these popular things, or you can also run some terminal like console browser just to validate the source that's actually generated, and not specifically, if it looks well or something like this. Selenium is another popular way to do testing. It's pretty much decoupled. There's a driver in Ming to do tests with Selenium on the top of Selenium, but you can also use it as a standalone too. You can do testing with it. You can do, you can write code in several different languages because the core has different language support. You can run servers to do proper work, and you can even use it as a, say, if you're not a developer, you can just use it as a designer or a simple user to record tests with your browser, say Firefox, by run tests, you click in several places, which means you do several operations. You hit record, like stop, and the recorded macro, the recorded demo, can be repeated over and over again if you run it again. Which means that if you want to do, for example, you have 20 pages, and you want to click on each page item separately and scroll, just to see that they're all fine. And you need to test 50 themes with the same flow. What you can do is get Selenium, record these tests, record this demo once, and then play it for all themes in a row, which is quite helpful too, especially for larger projects. Say if you have a large hosted multi-site platform with thousands of themes, you can automate some of these processes here. You can also do, say, screenshot generation and other things, just to easify and simplify the process. Now about the toolkit. The LP CLI is quite a handy tool to manage your WordPress installation from the terminal. How many of you are acquainted with it? The LP CLI? Alright, not enough. Well, the LP CLI, again, is the way to manage your WordPress installation without actually getting to any sort of UI. If you have console access to this, say you have some SSH there, or you have some remote tool that only works through SSH, or you're on your own installation in the terminal and you want to do some stuff, you can use the LP CLI. It can do quite a lot of things. It can download the WordPress core, configure, install some plugins, do some search of the plugins, install favorite plugins, add new users, remove users, add permissions, everything. It's really helpful for automation. Our SiteGround main servers has this, and I'm pretty much using it for all the sites. Just, okay, I need to get to this site and add this permission. It's actually easier for me because how can you add a new capability to a WordPress website? I personally can't do it from the user interface. It's not easy. I need to install some plugin that manages capabilities. Here you can just go to the shell and just add a capability with one single line to a given role. List all capabilities of the user, get all roles, add new role, everything that pretty much a WordPress can do in terms of single small operations can be done through the terminal. It can be extended. There are several awesome plugins that run on the top of the LP CLI, and I even heard that they're actually working on some UI, not the core team, because they're more these like hidden guys that stay behind the computers and they're like, we don't like UI, we use it because we don't like UI and that sort of stuff, which means that another team is actually working on the user interface part of the LP CLI. Another thing, if you're working locally and you need to manage a larger WordPress setup, is using Vagrant. Vagrant is a way to run a virtual machine on your website, and this virtual machine could be configured to actually run all the tools that you actually need and replicate exactly the system from your production server. Say you're working on some platform as a service or some software as a service, you have some Amazon or some other huge plan that runs, say, Ubuntu or CentOS or anything like this, and you use Windows or Mac. Well, you can't really replicate the operating system, the right version of PHP, MySQL, or anything like that. In Vagrant, you can set up a new VM without X, which means that it's only the no user interface version. It's lighter, it runs pretty fast, and you can set a development environment that completely replicates what your existing production server is. It means less issues while you work locally on one setup and something is broken on the production setup. It really couldn't happen anymore due to different versions or different servers. So you don't need to think about this sort of problem. There's also an extension to this which is called Varying Vagrants, VVD, as I usually call it. It's from 10 up, and the team generally created a specific VM setup for Vagrant, which means that you can install it for a couple of minutes, and you have the latest WordPress version with Apache, web server with PHP, latest WordPress version set up on a specific port, and you can directly start working on your new project. You also have the latest trunk of WordPress if you want to contribute, and it's pretty much self-contained in this virtual machine. You can destroy it, rebuild it, run it, and pretty much everything. Really light, fast, and less conflicts due to different configuration settings. Let's proceed to the deployment. As you probably know, one does not simply use FTP for white sites. If you have a real production website and you say, oh yeah, I'm just going to update this plugin by, drag the new functionality and say replace all your files. Or I'm going to, delete this thing with FTP and just upload it back again. It's not really the best way to maintain your environment. We already said that you need to have a reliable server, you need some toolkit to do it properly. You definitely need version control. And version control is pretty much the key here, as you really need to set the things properly. My favorite tool for automated deployment is called Capistrano. It's a Ruby-driven tool that helps you to automate remote server building process. Which means, again, you have a server, it's online, it runs your large project service, whatever it is. And you need to do updates, it's normal. I mean, it's not a static website. In order for the website to actually make any sort of income, it needs to be updated constantly with different things. If you do the FTP part and you need to do an update with 15 files, it's probably going to do at the moment of transfer. People refreshing the website are going to see broken pages. This file is missing, this file is incompatible with the other file, the FTP file is broken, the transfer is broken in the middle, and the website is down. It's not a professional attitude, and it shouldn't be happening normally. What Capistrano does is setting different environments. You can even set production, staging, development, some other stuff, and so forth environments. And what it does is the following. The www folder or public HTML or whatever you call it and set it, is pointing is a symlink to a folder. Which means that your folder is something in the Capistrano directory. It's the latest version of your project. Whenever you deploy a new project, a new version, it's pushing everything to a new folder, and it's just moving the symlink to the new folder. Why is that so helpful? Two reasons. First, putting the symlink takes milliseconds. Even if you deploy, if you change the entire project, the symlink just takes milliseconds, maybe microseconds, I'm not even sure. The second thing is that if the new version is broken, you can directly roll back to the previous version by again just changing the symlink to point to the other version. And you're all set. Everything happens in milliseconds. It's safe. It's pretty much bulletproof. Well, unless the server is down for some reason, but better not push that sort of code into the server. And it's a better way to do stuff. There's a plugin called WP Start that's full recipes for configuring WordPress projects. In addition to the WordPress skeleton, you can set up your new project and use the recipes for WP Start that are built by Mark Jaquith for facilitating the WordPress process by pretty much using Capistrano to build your websites on WordPress. Most of these tools, or specifically setting background and specifically setting more servers, would require you to automate some systems configuration too. Chef and Puppet are two of the popular tools to do that, and they can help you do the automation for your own server. Say you have 10 servers that are holding your web configuration, like 10 web servers, and when you need to add 5 more, you don't want to install manually pretty much everything. You don't want to go with bash scripts that are also not 100% safe. You can use Chef and Puppet to use their own scripting languages and to do the updates too. How you can do that? You can say, I need, say, version PHP 5.5. And if it has any dependencies, download all dependencies. I need this version of a patch. I need them installed in this folder. I need this folder here. If it doesn't exist, create it. If you can't create it, sudo and create it. If it's this permission, change to this permission. So you can configure all the entire process, all installations, user management. You can check user levels. You can update them on the fly. And this is what you can do with these two languages. One is Chef, the other is Puppet. Couldn't find more proper title for this. The Chef one is more of a Ruby-based, and the Puppet is more of a sysadmin based. But this is quite powerful. It's a bit harder to get into it, but then you can do a lot of dark magic on your server. A few more things that I just need to quickly outline is the Git hooks. The other reason that people use Git for is that you can use hooks. You can say use hooks before committing, after committing, or before pushing to some server, before pulling, and so forth. You can do that for your own protection for some reason, or you can do it just to automate some process that's business specific and not technically specific. For instance, one of the things that I normally do is I have my own Git pre-commit hook that checks if I've left some debugger or vardom statement in my code before I push. And I was setting a WordPress environment the other day, and I said, okay, like this is my project, I initiated it, I just need to push a new project to a server that's later going to use Capistrano. So I added all the files, I hit git commit and initialize the LP. And I saw this weird message, there's some vardoms. And my script here said, vardom found in the commit, vardom is found in the commit, which is what actually happened. And I say, okay, that couldn't be happening. This is a clean WordPress install, and this is my own script, so it's probably broken. Then it turns out that some vardom was actually existing in wp-diff.php. And I know that it's a bit blurry, sorry about that. Like it's too scaled, so you can probably see it as well. But I published that 3 days ago or something like that. And Marco Heine said, well, it's actually from 2.6. So it turns out there are almost 100 lines of code, debugged code, staying in WordPress for almost 6 years. And my pre-commit hook found it, and it got me to code it like 12 hours ago, 15, something like that. So you can use these commit hooks for larger projects, including the WordPress code. You can try to validate, say, missing domain locales while you put some WordPress functions in your team. So you can try to do missing brackets, opening or closing, just to ensure that what you actually commit is safe, like what this pre-commit hook does. But you can only do it with Git. Well, not only, but it's really easy to do it with Git, doing the entire version control, following commits, and following the entire process. For maintenance, Composer is a dependency manager for PHP. Not sure if you've used it, but you can, again, similarly to Git and Git submodules, you can tie different PHP libraries, connect them together, use a specific version from the Composer repository, use always the dev version if you want, and keep your project updated if it uses tons of different PHP libraries. It leads to less maintenance of custom libraries. You can just directly pull them from the outside. Pretty helpful. Grunt is the popular thing that you can use to automate some tasks. It's running on Node.js, so the tasks are written in pretty much JavaScript, and you can automate different stuff. You can minify scripts, you can zip and unzip some stuff, you can get your WordPress installation, move some files into a new folder, change some permissions, or anything like that that it can actually happen from the console, so that you can prepare your project for development and standardize it to a different platform. Say, if you have some system-specific arguments, you can just update it with Grunt and fix that later. And at the very end, you can use continuous integration. Travis is one of these examples. What you can do here is set up several environments, several servers, several different PHP versions, several different WordPress versions. You can do tests, PHP unit, QUnit, you can do the hub tests, as we already mentioned. And whenever you need to push something, it can run to Travis and it say, okay, I'm going to deploy your new code on all the environments that you picked. I'm going to run all the tests, and if there are any broken tests, the new commit won't get into the new version. It's the safest way to test against several installs with the latest versions. Well, that's pretty much all. I know that most people are lazy and they say, why should I do this for a new project? The short version is, it's not a rocket science. It's not really as hard. There's things such as WP stack that you can use. You just need to reach from the moment of, I won't do it, to yes, I did it. It's a hard process. It normally takes several broken sites, hacked sites, pissed clients, a lack of payments, but you normally go through the ladder on the top until you learn to set up this in 1 or 2 hours, the entire stack, and do all the professional development while easily roll back everything. And at the end, don't forget, caching, quite important, lots of different ways and lots of different types of caching available, logging of your data so that you can find some bottlenecks from your code, from the servers, errors in the SQL database or whatever, and debugging to be able to write a code in a way that you find all the bottlenecks easily. That's all. My slides are up because it's a WordPress plugin, so it's a WordPress install online. You can find the slides. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Hi, Mario.
Hey.
Do you use Composer, for instance, to control versions of plugins?
Of plugins?
Yes.
Well, I don't use it for plugins, but I normally use it in a plugin when this plugin depends on different libraries. But you can pretty much use it as well. It's just a personal preference. Like normally when you have different, because Composers works on packages that are available on the Composer website, so not every script pretty much is on Composer, so you are pretty much limited at some point of view. But if you use some libraries, and for instance several plugins of yours use a specific library, you can up that dependency remotely on different place and update this package for all plugins at the same time.